Thank you, and for the benefit of the people sitting over here, Ann Louise, as soon as I'm through here, if we can move this out of the way so these folks can get a look at the people we have sitting in these chairs. I appreciate very much you being here today. I was asked if I would put something together for the 50th reunion of the 63 class, and I was prone to suggest before I even talked to these folks that we could get a good panel up here to talk about the mix of academics and athletics here at the university, which seems, with what we've been undergoing in recent years, it seems to be a big question mark in everybody's mind. You cannot tell that from the number of admissions that we've made to the university this year, or the funds that were raised by various departments in the university, but there is some concern, and so I thought best that we would bring the people here who have some knowledge of it, and we would answer it directly. Allow me to introduce our four panelists. Dr. Holden Thorp, he's a chemist, he's an inventor, he's a musician, a professor, and an entrepreneur. He is a talented guy. He's the 10th Chancellor of the University of North Carolina, and after 5 years in that position, as we all know now, he will step down on June 30th to become the provost at Washington University in St. Louis. Seated next to him, Dr. Jan Boxill. She is the senior lecturer in the Department of Philosophy at Carolina and the director of the Parr Center for Ethics at Carolina. She is also serving a 3-year term as chair of the faculty. She was elected 2 years ago in the largest voter turnout for that position in over a decade. And she came to the university in 1985 after serving in the Air Force and obtaining 3 degrees at UCLA. Next is Bubba Cunningham. 18 months ago, he became the 7th athletic director here at Carolina after spending 6 years at Tulsa and 3 at Ball State. A graduate at Notre Dame, where he earned 2 degrees, he spent 14 years in the athletic department at South Bend, serving as Associate Director of Athletics for Finance and Facilities, and then External Affairs. Dr. Beth Miller, as both a coach and administrator, she's been here in Chapel Hill at the university since 1975. She had coached both volleyball and softball for the Tar Heels when she became athletic business manager in 1979. And then in 1985, she began supervising the Olympic sports program as the senior women's administrator. Now, as a senior associate athletics director, she coordinates 13 programs while also working to ensure the consistency in the management and the evaluation of individual programs. Folks, please join me in thanking the members of this panel for agreeing to spend time with us today. Well, I have several questions to start off with. I will ask a question, an overall question here at the start, and we'll get all 4 of the panelists to respond. The first indication of a huge black mark on the university's integrity, the first in nearly half a century, came in the summer of 2010. And I don't hear my lapel microphone working.
You're on there.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Wanted to be sure. I'm so used to having it loud enough so it comes back on me. The situation I'm talking about is the first for this university in nearly half a century. It came in the summer of 2010 when 3 selfish football players thought only of themselves. So my question to the panel, why nearly 3 years later are we still talking about the fallout, both academic and otherwise, that followed? Chancellor?
Oh, that's the... Can y'all hear me?
I don't
How
think
about now? Okay, how's that? I'm on. Am I on?
Now, there we go.
Is that better?
Got a lot of experts out there, Chancellor.
Yeah. That's the way it goes.
They're still telling you how to do your job, right?
I always tell people, you know, when I was a young faculty member and I was thinking about what I was going to do in the future, I thought I'd do chemistry for a while, and if I was good at it, then I'd go to the seminary and become an Episcopal priest. And I realized,
There we go.
and I realized that getting this job, I got the same thing in 4 ways. I visit the sick. I wear a robe and stand in a pulpit occasionally. I ask my congregation for money. and everybody thinks they know how to do my job. So I can... I'm not the AV guy. Oh, there you go. Okay. I think the reason that it went on so long is because we, as a campus, we had not really come to terms with what it means to be competitive in big-time sports and the risks that are attendant to it. And also, we're a place where a lot of the discussion about reform in athletics had taken place. And that's because Mr. Friday was on the Knight Commission, and in many ways, people associate the Knight Commission with the University of North Carolina. And what happens in these instances when you have one constituency that are strong sports fans and another constituency that are sort of the Knight Commission crowd is, you know, there's no way to make both of them happy. And so a wise sports person once told me, well, when you get in this situation, the best you can do is play for a tie. And I tried to get a tie between the Knight Commission and the sports fans for 2.5 years, and it was impossible. And I think what is going to have to happen so that this can finally end and that Carol Folt and Bubba Cunningham and Jan and Beth Miller and Lisa Broom and everybody who works in athletics don't have to continue to deal with this, is we need to get the campus to the other side of understanding that we're going to be competitive in big-time sports. We're going to do it by the rules, but we're going to have to take certain risks and manage certain kinds of problems that come with that. And I know the Knight Commission crowd is not happy the last few weeks that they've been hearing me say that, but no other school has come up with the other solution. And in fact, I was talking to somebody about one of the openings that we have here, and who was from a peer school, great sports, great public university, huge research program. And he said, why is this thing still going on? And I said, well, it's not like at your place. There are a lot of people here who haven't accepted all of the things that you have to do in order to succeed in sports. And so what you're seeing is sort of the 5 stages of grief as different people on the campus go through accepting that we're going to be competitive in sports. We're going to do it by the rules, but occasionally, probably more frequently than once every 50 years, we're going to have some problems. But when we have them, we're going to deal with them decisively. And I think that's the system that we have put in place here.
Jan, could we get your impression?
Sure, and I think that what the Chancellor said, I would just follow up. I think that there's a lot of perceptions out there, and perceptions, as you know, for many people become reality. So one of the reasons I believe that we're still working on it is, number one, we are being transparent, and that requires a whole lot of work, right? It requires a whole lot of reports. But it also, one of the things that people have is that there's a big divide between athletics and academics, and there really isn't, except that we've got the stadium here on South Campus, but also right over here the sciences. So I think one of the things for us to do is to make things understandable to both sides, to both athletics to understand all the difficulties of academics, and academics to understand all the difficulties in athletics, keeping in mind that we aren't going to get rid of Division I athletics. And also I think that things change so quickly that we are trying to always anticipate, but we don't always do that. So I think having the number of reports and investigations, it's in a way trying to do what the Chancellor said is to satisfy everyone, and that really isn't going to be possible. However, we'll try to satisfy as many people as possible, and so for the faculty, it's to make sure that academics comes number one, and I think even for athletics, they recognize that as well. So I think there's a divide and a perception which we're trying to understand both sides.
Bubba?
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My first job out of college, I was in public accounting. Didn't go so well. It lasted about 4 months. Came back and worked in the Alumni Association. So I want to welcome you back to campus. And I had a great time. For 4 years, I worked in the Alumni Association and got to meet all kinds of people that had gone through my alma mater, their alma mater, and had a chance to relate to me what it was like when they went to school. And to a person, every single one of them thought the 4 years they were in school were the 4 best years in the history of the institution. So I'm sure it's probably the same here. But what I did learn in that experience was the value of intercollegiate athletics and the role of intercollegiate athletics. And as I've worked in college athletics for the last 25 years, it's become very apparent to me that we're a very small part, yet very visible part, of the educational enterprise of the university. And so as long as we keep that perspective, I think the role, and we've been here, I've been at the university about 18 months, and we have a strategic plan that we developed as an entire staff. And our strategic plan is that we educate and inspire through athletics. We recognize as a department, we're not the focal point of the institution. We're here to provide education, and we're here to provide opportunities. You know, I'm fortunate that I went to a great place that I think has a good balance of academics and athletics. I think Stanford has a great balance. I truly believe you can do it. You can be at the top academically and athletically. And I think what a lot of the things that the Chancellor said and what Jan said is it's about openness and it's about transparency and it's about understanding the reality of the enterprise today, whether it's the academic enterprise, which are continuing to raise the academic standards of the entire student body, and then it's incumbent upon the athletic department to raise our standards so that the students we invite to participate are going to be successful Monday to Friday and on Saturday. So I really believe we can do that. We've done it over an extended period of time, and we're going to continue to do it. But it does, when your integrity is synonymous with your brand, and you have a breach of integrity, which is what we had, it's very difficult to recover from it. I think we're beginning that healing process now, and I think as we move forward, you're going to see outstanding coaches and great students that keep the institution first and foremost in their mind when they're making decisions about how to make this place proud.
Beth, as a coordinator of athletics, you come in contact, perhaps even more so than Bubba, with coaches on a daily basis. What's been the impression of those athletes and coaches that are still working for Carolina and trying to do good things as to what's been going on?
Right. Can you hear me?
Here. Just take this. There you go.
How about now? Got it? Woody, I think that's a great question. And obviously, you know, everybody gets asked all the time. Our Olympic sport coaches, they get asked questions when they're out recruiting, you know, whether it's baseball, whether it's field hockey, regardless of what it is, they get asked questions because it's been such a public scenario going on for several years. And, you know, the thing, when they ask me about it, when I get asked about it, I say, yes, we do. We've had an issue. We've had some problems. We had, you know, there were some mistakes made. But let me tell you about the good things that are going on. I can talk a lot longer about the good things that are going on with Carolina athletics than you might imagine. Let's don't just talk about those things, the bad things. And I think that's what our coaches do when they're out recruiting. It's affected everybody, and I think we knew it would. But they're answering it. They're answering the questions. They're talking to the parents. They're talking to the recruits, and you know, talking about all the positive things that are happening, and trying not to let the negative things impact their programs. Although we all know it's out there.
They don't have other coaches recruiting against them, do they?
Only a couple. And I think that's part of the issue, too. I mean, obviously, you have to face the fact that it's going to be used against us in recruiting. So some of the other coaches out there that are recruiting against our coaches are trying to use it against us, and that's why our coaches are trying to put a positive spin on the good things that are going on, and they're doing a great job of it. I think if you talk to our Olympic sport coaches, pretty much all the way down the line, I cannot tell you that they've lost a recruit because of this, and that's a great thing.
Chancellor, I thought long and hard before asking you this next question.
I can't get fired, Woody. Don't worry about what it is.
But he can.
But Bubba said, but you can.
Yeah. But I'm personally aware of some of the things that this gentleman, as well as his family, went through after he decided to make a major decision. And you have also said that the timing wasn't good, but why did you feel it was necessary to make the football change you did just prior to the beginning of preseason practice in 2011?
Well, we were very unlucky in terms of the timing of the way the investigation played out. Obviously, the best time to make a change in a coach is at the end of the season. But at the end of the season, we didn't really know exactly where we were going to end up with the NCAA. We didn't find that out until much later in the spring. And so, I think and Mr. Cunningham can talk about this a little bit more, but, and in fact, after our case, the NCAA changed the rules so that if there's a major violation against an assistant, anytime after, is it October the 31st this year, then it's also a major violation on the head coach. Mm-hmm. So that's a rule that the NCAA put in partly in response to our case. So in April and May, we found out that we were going to get 9 major violations, and we knew that we were going to accept essentially all of those, including one in which we had an assistant coach who was, for all practical purposes, acting as an agent, and that's the first time that that's happened in the history of the NCAA, as far as I'm concerned. So it's kind of hard to think how you would, over the long term, make it okay to have a violation of that kind and not have major changes. Mm-hmm. And so I came to the conclusion that that was, in the long run, the best thing for the university, and I think particularly seeing how the conversation has played out, that was the right reasoning. But again, part of the problem that we have here is because everyone was so shocked and surprised that we could have something like this here, the back and forth between the crowd who either don't like athletics at all or expect that what we had for 50 years where we didn't have to deal with these things was the way it was always going to be. The back and forth between that crowd and the sports crowd is really tough to navigate, and I think, unfortunately, was probably the best way to do it. But I hate like hell I couldn't find a smoother way to do what I had to do.
Jan, the summer of 2011, if I'm correct on this, was the summer of your election as chair of the faculty.
Yes. A lot of bad timing in this whole story.
Outside the classroom and your philosophy lectures, you have spent some time very much close to athletics. You were for a good many years the PA voice for women's basketball. You're still the PA voice for women's field hockey. And you're the radio analyst for Sylvia Hatchell's basketball broadcast. What did you feel, as this situation developed, was the relationship that people try to make so much over between the faculty and athletics?
Well, I think one of the things is, things happened interestingly, and I think serendipitously in my case as well. I think having been on both sides, it gave me a good insight into both athletics and academics. So I understand the issues and see how the divide sometimes happens and how the perception sometimes happens. But I also think, again, going back to what I said, the perceptions that some faculty have is that all athletes are football players, right? And all football players are admitted, under the radar, so to speak. And so we do have over 800, and I think it's something that Dr. Miller said, is to what I tried to do is to also recognize that there's a lot going on, and we can't just treat the 3 or 4 athletes, even 10, whatever, as all 800, right? So I think that having been, I also played basketball at UCLA. I was a coach for many years, working in it, and worked in athletics. So I've been at every level to sort of understand. And
that's why you're here today.
And as you pointed out, I've also played with 11 brothers and sisters. So, but it does give me insight, I think, and sometimes people will say, well, you're too much one way or the other, but I'm not. I've been an academic all my life, and I've been involved in sports all my life, and so I think the combination is really helpful. But it also, at times, I was very uncomfortable because I know how important sports is. But one of the things, and Beth alluded to this too, everything that happens in sports is public, right? And so we see, the things that happen, and of course the negative things are what sell. And so I think what my role, I try to again, be as transparent as possible to sort of get people to understand that there's some value. And I think it's what brings all of you back in some ways, right? I mean, many people come back here to visit the campus partly because of the sports and also, of course, because of academics. All right, so there are lots of reasons why, and even those who are opposed to sports say, well, we love big time sports, but then we don't think it belongs on campus or something. All right, so, yeah.
My next question, just to follow up on that before we go to Beth and then back to Bubba, is In a recent open forum, there wasn't that much, but there was noticeably some comments from various faculty members very much opposed to the way college athletics is being handled on
Right.
this campus.
And I think that I think there's always going to be some. I don't think that we can satisfy everyone. And I think that those who are concerned and have criticism, I think we have taken them to heart, because the very first thing when I became faculty chair, actually even before that, before I took over in July 1st, I got emails from faculty members saying, we need to do an investigation. And I immediately, so it was 6 emails that I got. Now 6 out of 3,600 faculty is not very many. But one of the things we did do is to respond to their concerns. So nobody's concerns are disregarded, and I think that's one of the things that I've tried to do, is to make sure that everybody's concerns are looked into. I mean, we just had the one about whether we should have football games on Thursday nights. It's something they addressed a few years ago, and it's something we're addressing again, right? So we've made a whole lot of changes, the recommendations, because we have admitted some students who are underprepared. But what we have made sure now is, given all that's gone on, if we have hired specialists, reading specialists and learning specialists, we would hope to have, in the end, not to ever have to do those. But the fact that we do admit some, if the concern is we're exploiting athletes, then the exploitation is that we're not giving them the education they deserve, and that's what we're trying to make sure they get.
Bubba, back to you in just a moment. But Beth, soon after the change in football, Dick Badur announced his resignation as athletic director 11 months ahead of the date on his contract. But what was it like around the department when you were waiting, you, the coaches, the athletes, and so forth, for a new athletic director to be selected and hired?
Well, obviously there was, still not working. Okay.
Is yours on?
I thought it was. I don't know. Is this better now?
Yeah.
Obviously there's some anxious moments, because everyone in the department you don't know who your next athletic director is going to be, who your boss is going to be. And, so I think you keep hearing rumors. I mean, anytime there's a kind of a public search for an athletic administrator, an athletic director, a chancellor, whatever, you keep hearing rumors about who the candidates are, and so everybody's kind of behind the scenes a little bit, kind of saying, oh my goodness, oh no, that can't happen, and these kinds of things, and so it's like, oh wow, what would we do if that happens? And so I think from my standpoint, I was just trying to say, we got a ways to go, we're not there yet, let's let the committee do their work, and and I think everything will turn out fine. And I was a prophet. Everything turned out great. So, obviously everyone's anxious, not knowing. And it's kind of like when, a sport gets a new head coach. All of the players, the student athletes, they don't know what their position is going to be. They don't know how things are going to change. So I think there's some, also, some anxious moments there. But we were so fortunate, and turned out that the committee did a great job and selected Bubba, and then of course Chancellor Thorp was the one who actually made the hire and did a super job in getting us Bubba Cunningham.
So after 20 months, he gets passing grades from you, right?
He's got my full approval.
Good. Bubba, the question for you is, during the hiring process, you knew what was happening here and what the university was going through at that moment, yet you still decided to come. Why?
Yeah, Woody, when I met my wife, I thought I knew her.
This is going to be good.
When we got married, I found out a lot more things. Has anybody seen that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding? My wife is Greek. And I'm not. So I'm living it every day. No, I was here in 91, 92 in the Sports Management Institute. Dick Badur was in the class. Beth, I think you were in that class as well. And, you think about the University of North Carolina, and it is the top of the top in everything that you do. The reputation is unbelievable. And then when you think you may even have the opportunity to be here, you have to pinch yourself to think that opportunity may be a possibility. I owe a debt of gratitude to Chancellor Thorp for this opportunity. It's absolutely tremendous. And, you know, I'll be thankful for the rest of my life given that opportunity. And for poor Beth, when her worst nightmare came true and I got here, it was different. But it is a spectacular place. And yes, I knew there were some problems. I didn't know the depth of the problems. I didn't realize, you know, I knew we had some agent issues, some extra benefits. We had an infractions case, and I assumed that when the NCAA report would be finalized, that we would move on. I didn't realize that it would be connected to an academic department, and then it would have multiple investigations and reviews for the next year and a half. But as we've said throughout the entire process, a lot of this is going to make the institution better. Now, it's painful when you get there, but you really hope when you get to the other side that you're a better place because of it. So I couldn't be more pleased, couldn't be happier, couldn't be more fortunate to be here. I have a son who just completed his first year of studies at the University of North Carolina and had a great experience, so I can say it from a staff member's point of view and from a parent point of view that it is a great place. And we get mired in what's wrong, but there are so many more great things that are right, and it certainly is an honor to be a part of it.
A bit later in this session, we're going to give you the opportunity to ask some questions, but we're going a little bit more here with these panelists because there is actually sort of several events, and I've tried to put them in chronological order to really go back and ask the members of the panel about some of the things that happened. Chancellor, there's an old saying in athletic circles that you can let NCAA investigators onto your front porch, but you don't let them in the house. Despite forfeiting wins in 2008, 2009, and reducing the number of scholarships given in a given year, the NCAA wanted more. And Chancellor, additional sanctions were announced 5 months after you had made the announcement about what was going to happen. What was your reaction regarding the cooperation of the university as it was answering the NCAA?
You know, I think we did a good job cooperating. And there's really, once they show up and start doing stuff, and again, the outside world will comment on you should have done this, you should have done that, but as you just said, once they come in and start poking around, it's gonna be a rough ride, pretty much no matter how you slice it. So I think that we were not stunned that we got a bowl ban and some scholarship reductions. A lot of the people who don't like college sports at Carolina, and certainly a lot of our rival fans, including those who serve on various governing boards in the institution, felt that we got off easy. And I think a big part of why things have gone on longer is that there's a pretty vocal contingent out there that thinks that we should have had an even harsher punishment. And there are a lot of people putting pressure on me to do more myself to athletics because they didn't feel, they think that, you know, if I was really somebody who took this whole thing seriously, I'd walk out on the steps of South Building and announce some more penalties. Well, one of the things that I decided that I think was correct is that we were going to do the best we could to minimize the sanctions that we got from the NCAA. And we had hoped they would be, but that whatever we got, we'd admit we had a lot of things went wrong and we deserved to be penalized. So, you know, I think where it ended up is, in retrospect, probably more or less the right place. And I think we've had some effects from it, but Larry Fedora's brought in some great classes in football, and Bubba's put some really good measures in place in terms of compliance to deal with the fact that we're on probation. And, you know, I think that part of it is okay. I think the thing that has hurt us is, you know, the media and the other people who think that we got off easy. And I don't think we got off easy. I think we got the right penalties.
Right. Dropping back to the summer of 2011, academic issues in the Department of African and Afro-American Studies began cropping up. The university notified the NCAA of new issues, but it was not an NCAA matter at that time. Turns out the actions were clearly traceable to two former employees, one of whom, the longtime departmental office administrator, retired in September of 2009, and also the long-serving chair of that department, who relinquished the tenured faculty position that he held, and of course resigned once the school year of 2012 was over. That action came in February. Now, since all of this started, there have been 5 investigative reports thus far. The first appeared in April of 2012. Jan, Chancellor Thorp, Bubba, you were among the individuals interviewed for a lot of those reports. What was your reaction if there was a definite conclusion to those reports? What was your reaction to what the reports found?
Well, I think initially for us, it was devastating, right? I think, we have the athletic part and then now added to the academic part, but what it does show, of course, we are more connected than some people might have thought. But I think also the reports, even though they were horrible to do and to go through, I think the issue was that everyone wanted to find out just why these things could have happened here at UNC and to make sure that we understood clearly. And this involved a lot of faculty, a lot of administrators. And so I think that there was no one who didn't want to participate that couldn't have in the investigations and in the reports. And so what's come out of it is lots of new policies. Things that, what's interesting about Carolina, as many of you know, it's the tradition. And so people are very reluctant to, break traditions. And so I think in some ways things just carried on, and because we have a great graduation rate and so forth, and the athletics were doing well. But I think that what these have done, and they move slowly, which is why they're still going, we're still feeling the part of it, but because to make sure that that every stone is turned, right, so that we don't leave anything undone, and so that we do come out with the best possible that UNC could have. And I think we've done that. But it was initially very devastating, and I think it, again, was a blow to the integrity, and this time a different kind of blow. But I think we have handled it in the best way we could with what we had.
Bubba, any comment?
No, I share a lot of the same comments. But, I think a lot of this, when the investigation started, people were, wanting to get to the bottom of it. Get to the bottom of it is what we heard over and over. I believe we are at the bottom of it. And I do think accountability is something that we all sought in this entire process. And when you ask about penalties and were the penalties and the punishments appropriate, I certainly believe that they were. Because I think a lot of people forget that, there's a new athletic director. There's a new associate athletic director for compliance and student services. There's a new director of compliance. There's 10 new football coaches. There's a new department head in African American studies. And we have all kinds of new procedures and policies in place in the college that I couldn't even begin to talk about, that I know the Chancellor and Jan could talk about at length. So we have a lot more personal accountability. I think, as the Chancellor indicated early, is that when you don't have any problems, don't have any major problems for an extended period of time, you really develop great trust and respect for people, and you think everyone's doing the right thing. But what we've learned in this process is you need both trust and verification. So what we have put in place is verification that we're actually doing what we're saying. We had great policies, sometimes we didn't follow them all. So we had trust, but now we feel like we have trust and verification. So we hope that that system will serve us well going forward.
Bubba, I tried to read a couple of those reports, and it made my head hurt, so I stopped after a while. But one of the reports said, it may never be known whether some student athletes were advised to enroll in irregular classes to help preserve their eligibility, but no evidence was found to support such a conclusion. However, it is reasonable to assume that many students enrolled in these courses expected to get good grades. Now that scared me to death because I thought surely somebody had uncovered my transcript from Dr. J. Penrose Harlan's archaeology course.
How many people were in Dr. Harlan's course? Yeah, okay. Does anyone want an investigation of that? And Woody, before you go on, this is the point that I think is so important. If no athletes had taken these classes and had been like it was in the old days, we would have announced this, we would have announced the investigation, we would have told their accrediting body, it would have been a 3-day story, and everybody would have gone home. And it's only because of the heightened interest that attends intercollegiate athletics, which is a good thing on some days and a bad thing on others, that this whole thing escalated to the way that it did.
Well, I was very fortunate. I just said I'd like to take that as my elective. and I was fortunate enough to get a class ticket. And I'll never forget the first day that I was in Dr. Harlan's course. He had a long golf driver in his hand, but it had no head on it. A student from the year before had taken the head off and put a rubber tip on it so he could point out the slides of Doric and Corinthian architecture. See, there I did learn something. But he stepped up on the podium that day and he said, it has come to his attention that class tickets were selling for $50. He said, my advice to all of you in this room is hold out for $75. Now, fortunately, there was no NCAA investigation then because we did have some athletes in that class. But another report. Chancellor Thorp asked former Governor Jim Martin, who was a professor of chemistry at Davidson College, to come and with a committee to look into what was going on here, and he had one of the 5 reports when it was over. And while he came up with some very interesting things, it was amazing as to how a number of people, Chancellor, thought that he didn't have sufficient answers for a lot of the questions.
Yeah, well, the problem is, and again, this gets back to this whole concept of playing for a tie and how people feel about college athletics or how they feel about the University of North Carolina if they're at a rival school. We figured the whole thing out in the summer of 2011. We told the NCAA about it. We did our own investigation to tie up a few loose ends, and we got the people involved out of the university. Nobody was satisfied with the story, but people have been looking at it for 18 months since then, and nobody's really found anything that changes it materially. So the problem we've had, and that's why I say it's about the community coming to grips with the fact that this is there more than it is any kind of penalty or an investigation, because the story hasn't changed since, I mean, we didn't disclose it until May, but in South Building we knew, and we had communicated to the NCAA more or less what was going on in October or November of 2011. And so this is a communications struggle, and it's a struggle for people to come to terms with what they want, and it's a philosophical struggle. But as far as the facts of what actually happened are concerned, those haven't changed for a year and a half.
His statement when he gave this report to the Board of Trustees, his opening statement was, this is an academic scandal and not an athletic scandal. Now, as I said, his report in the minds of a lot of people, well, first off, that didn't please a lot of people because they thought surely it was both. It was an athletic and academic scandal. And as I said, a lot of people thought his report didn't answer every question. But he found, as he was looking and doing the work on this report, he and his committee, that there were instructors who didn't teach in the African and Afro-American Studies program. There were grades that had been changed. There were grade reports that were fake. But the most disappointing thing was he found that this stuff had gone on since 1997. Jan, why would something last that long and not be detected in some way, shape, or form?
Well, I don't know all of the administrative details and how, in some ways, how the deans and administration works. But I think for faculty, that we were stunned, and how it goes is the same. It's actually what Bubba Cunningham said. We trust each other, and as academics, we work in silos, but we also work together, and I trust what my colleague is doing, and I think that's really. I think that's the biggest thing, right? That we just trust each other in academics. We assume the academic integrity and academic freedom. And I think, but I do think now we have put in place where, the fact was that this one person he wasn't evaluated as normal chairs would be because of the way his tenure came about and the way his chairship became about. And so I think the trust is number one, but I also think what we did is to find out why, and we have made those changes. So the other thing I wanted to say, just in case it doesn't, I don't have the opportunity, is one of the things we have done, and the faculty were very upset about it being an academic scandal and not and the way Governor Martin put it, and I agree, because. It does affect the very heart of the university, sure. And I think that's the big part. But one of the things that we have in faculty governance, we have an elected faculty athletic committee, And that committee, headed by Joy Renner now, has done amazing things to really get the facts as opposed to some of the perceptions. We did the same thing with I think Jonathan Hartland, the dean, did the report on the academic part to make those changes. And I think what we're doing in the faculty governance is to making sure that people understand that the graduation of the athletes and the majors, one of the concerns is they all major in the same thing. And as we've discovered, there's 3 majors that athletes generally will find a little bit more cluster, and that's business, which is surprising, exercise, sports science, which shouldn't be surprising, and communications. All right, so, and then there's there's a lot of journalism, I think, is the 4th top major. So as it turns out, when you do the research, you actually find that they're not focused in one department or in any one class. The other thing we have done is to look at the roll sheets in all classes to see if there's any student athletes are clustered in a certain course, right? And if there is over, I think it's 15%, I forget. And if there is any number over that, then you look at what that course is. Now, I teach a course in ethics in sports. I actually would hope that more athletes would take it, right? And so that one would be justifiable. But we're looking at every course that the university offers and every student in that course. Right, so that's a lot of work that we're putting in to make sure that those kinds of things don't happen.
You're a little bit ahead of me because that was my next question about what changes are in place now, major measures in place right now that will keep us from having to go through something like this again.
Yeah, so as Jan said, now every course that has, I think, more than 15% athletes in it is reviewed. Sometimes, just like Jan's class, it's ethics and sports. So if there's a lot of athletes in it, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a way of going through that. There's a review of all of the teaching loads of all of the departments that is happening everywhere. We had to go through all of this to satisfy our accrediting body. And the part of this that I've never been sort of bitter about or thought that we were harshly penalized or anything was when we found this, that we were going to have to go through with our accrediting body and tell them that we had this breach and that we had done a lot to make sure it didn't happen again. Because when we get accredited every 10 years, and when I go to St. Louis, I'll be a provost, and provosts are in charge of accreditation, so I better take this stuff seriously. When we get accredited, we certify that we know who is teaching every single class. And so what we had here was a problem where we didn't know who was teaching these classes. And so the day that I found out about, I never knew I knew who Julius Dangora was, but I didn't know that he was doing anything that I wouldn't be happy about. The day I found out who Debbie Crowder was, the first thing I said is, well, we're going to have to call SACS, which is the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. And they were here in April, and we'll get their ruling in June, and I believe we've satisfied their concerns, and so I expect to get that done before I get out of here. That part of it is really important, and what I wish is that people would have said, well, this is an accrediting issue from the very beginning. That's what it was. And the day I saw the grade sheets and the sketchy signatures and learned who Debbie Crowder was, I said, this is a SACS problem. That's really all it ever was, because we told the NCAA everything about it that related to athletes, and we dealt with the SACS problem. And again, the sad thing is, in a way, having an accrediting issue is a lot worse than having a handful of students who did something wrong. But yet, the reaction, if all this had been was a SACS issue, it wouldn't have gotten hardly any attention.
Beth, we talked earlier before the program got started today. Bubba has done a couple of major things other than hire a couple of head coaches. Larry Fedora in football and Harless Meadows in our track and field program. But one of the first things that he did was he did a restructuring of the department. And how has that worked? Because I know you have less sports to coordinate today rather than all you had besides football and basketball and sports like that in the past. But you don't have you have more work probably, don't you?
Well, I
I mean,
mean,
you're coordinating those sports, working with the coaches, and there are a lot of other people who are in the department doing athletic department work that have been asked to coordinate some sports too.
right. Prior to the reorganization, I was supervising all of our Olympic sports, which were 26 of our sports. And and it was, and I did it for a long time, so it kind of mastered how to budget my time and knowing which coaches were needier than others and giving them more attention and that type of thing. But, I mean, it was difficult. And then with the reorganization, I now have 13 sports, and we have 6 sport administrators, and that served quite a few purposes. And we also have secondary administrators now, so the additional administrators, for 2 purposes. We're able to service the sports more, give the sports, the coaches, the student athletes more attention, but then also it's enabling some of the staff, the administrative staff, to get the experience in doing that. And I think Bubba had a lot of things in mind when he was making that decision, and it's it's worked out well. There are times when we do have to have sport administrator meetings to make sure we're consistent, so that we're all giving the same answers to our coaches, and one sport administrator is not telling a coach one thing and then another one telling a different coach something else, and the 2 coaches coming back and saying, well, how are they doing this, and I can't do that. So we think that's a very real concern and something, but we've not really had issues with that, and I do think it's working. The question I get most of the time is, well, gosh, you may have a lot of free time now because you're not doing all the sports. And, it just hasn't worked that way. What has happened is the paperwork I have is less because it's distributed among the other sport administrators also. But I'm able to spend more time with each one of the coaches in the sports that I work with. So my time is totally filled up. And some of our other sport administrators may only have 1 or 2 sports, but they also have other responsibilities in the athletic department. So I think everybody has a full load. Everybody's hours are totally taken up, but we are able to service our sports and our coaches better, and I think it's working out well.
I know what you mean. I'm supposed to be retired. Bubba, you put this in effect in, I think, the summer of 2012. Earlier this year, in 2013, you introduced a strategic plan for the athletic department. Can you share with us what the major points and reasons behind it were?
Sure. The strategic plan was really intended to give our entire department a roadmap. We really do want to win the Director's Cup. We won it the first year. Stanford's won it the last 18. Beth has argued they're just lucky. I think that we can do a little bit better. So it really was to get everyone in the department on the same page and set some goals for ourselves. The coaches have the goals. They want to win a conference championship, want to win a national championship. And as a department, it's a little bit harder to get everyone on the same page. We have about 250 full-time people in the department, and we want to make sure that they're all completely engaged, that it's not Larry Fedora's football team and Coach Williams' basketball team. It's our football team, our basketball team. So when we get students to campus, we want to invite them to campus, make an assessment of whether or not we think they'd be a good fit for the institution, have them evaluate us and see if they would be a good person to be part of this community. We want the fans to come and enjoy the great facilities and to be clean and picked up. Visitors, we have over 1 million a year coming to the various athletic venues. All of that plays a role in college athletics. All of it plays a role in recruiting student athletes, retaining coaches. So we're trying to figure out a way to have everyone in our department know that they're a part of it. So we thought a strategic plan would really be helpful in trying to get everyone on the same page. And I think it's worked pretty well. It's not perfect by any means, and we'll continue to refine it. It's something that we refer to a lot, and we have 4 major goals. And the first priority that we have is alignment. We want to have our department aligned with the rest of the institution, and then we want the institution, as it relates to athletics, aligned with the ACC, with the NCAA, and recognize that we're part of a University of North Carolina system. Number 2 and number 3 are we have goals for academic achievement and athletic achievement. We want to be top 3 in the ACC and top 10 in the country in all 28 sports that we have. And we measure that. We measure it by admission standards. We measure it by graduation standards. We measure it by our performance in the Director's Cup. We measure it by performance in the conference. And then the last thing is administrative engagement. Do our staff members really know what we're all about? And how do we measure consistency and output from our staff? So we're trying to have some measurable statistics to show that we are making some progress toward our goals, and that we each have all of the staff help us develop those goals. So I think it's been helpful, but it continues to be refined as we move along.
One more question here on the podium, and then we're going to open it up. If you all have some questions that you'd like to ask any of our panel members, I hope that you will do so. Chancellor, there's one other report to come, and you have invited Hunter Rollins, President of the Association of American Universities, to come to the campus. And recently, when he was on the campus, he said the committee that he chairs will not look back, it will look forward. Now, that report may be released when you're the provost at Washington University in St. Louis, and I know you'll be interested in it. Is this going to be a closure? Do you anticipate it being a closure?
I don't think, and I used to think this so fondly over the last couple of years, that there's going to be one day where this is going to close and it's going to be over. It's going to just kind of keep, we have an expression in science called an asymptote, which means you keep getting closer and closer to the line, but you never actually get all the way there. So I think this is sort of decaying exponentially, and we'll get closer and closer to the asymptote as time goes on. And I think getting Hunter Rollins' report will get us a little closer to that point. You know, I felt a little bit like Ben Kenobi getting killed at the end of the first Star Wars and leaving everybody else to fight the rebellion by convening this panel and saying a bunch of really provocative things, and then getting in my car and driving across the Mississippi River and letting somebody else sort this out. But I think that it's a good time to discuss the broader issues, the ones that don't have to do with Marvin Austin or Debbie Crowder or any of these individual people, but the larger philosophical questions, because I think, as I've said, this has been a philosophical struggle more than anything else. And so I was hoping, and I think it will work, that when we launch the Rawlings process, that we could move to the remaining philosophical issues. And you know, I might get these questions in the follow-up questions, but you know, I still love Carolina sports. It's great what it does for the university. I don't have to, I mean, I'm leaving soon. I don't have to care about Carolina sports if I don't want to, but last night I had the night off and softball was on ESPN3, and I was watching us beat the crap out of Georgia Tech in softball last night. And I was cheering just as hard as I ever would for us. I think it's great what Carolina sports does for the university. And I think that most of our peers are further along in terms of accepting that it's a positive for the university and that we have to do it excellently, and it involves certain risks and the kinds of things that have happened to us. You know, we're going to, as Bubba just said, we put in all kinds of things to stop them from happening again, but the underlying issues are always there for us for a very small number of our athletes. I think those risks are worth taking for the University of North Carolina, given what it does for us. I mean, I'm going to a great university to be the provost. But a lot of people don't know whether the place I'm going is in Seattle or Washington, D.C., and most people don't think it's in Missouri. I told the chancellor we should have named it after John Adams, because there's too many other things named after George Washington. And Division III sports there is a great thing, but it's a totally different deal. And it's a nice thing for Washington University. I look forward to being part of it, but big-time sports is incredibly important to the University of North Carolina, and the people who take on the challenge of doing that deserve our respect and support, and they certainly have it from me.
You don't have to do this every morning, but every now and then, would you just look in the mirror when you're shaving and say, I'm Holden Thorp and I'm a Tar Heel?
You bet it. Okay. Yes, I will.
All right. Going to open it up for questions. Let's start right over here on the aisle. First hand to go up. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I've been asked that question a lot. So the question is, what advice do we have for Chancellor-elect Folt? Well, first let me say, when I made my decision to step down, I was hoping that we could sort of turn the temperature down and that I could do it at a time when the campus had time to recruit a really outstanding chancellor, and I don't think we could have done better than to get someone with her experience as a dean of arts and sciences, as a provost, as an interim president at a school like Dartmouth. It's absolutely great thing for Carolina that she's coming. Well, what I told her with regard to all this is that sports is really, really important. And I wish I'd known how hard it was going to be and how many challenges we would have. I mean, when I first started this job, the first year we won a national championship in field hockey, we won one in women's soccer, we won one in basketball, and we had a few little things here and there we had to work on, but I just thought this was absolutely great. What's not to love about Carolina sports or being part of it? And so I've told her to be skeptical, and I've told her she's got a great athletic director and she needs to stay close to him and let him make the decisions and the statements that need to be made about Carolina sports.
I can't remember if it was the Chancellor or Bubba who told me this, but she was here for the spring game, and after the first quarter, they took the new Chancellor down on the field to speak to Coach Fedora. And as Coach Fedora shook her hand, his comment was, "It's nice to meet you. Welcome to my classroom." Next question. Yes, sir, right over here.
Woody, Chancellor, I'd like to thank you for all you have done. I'm disappointed that you're leaving. But I want to raise one question regarding how the coach was managed and how we presented the report to the trustees initially. It seemed like he was expunged from any problems. And then several months later, he got fired.
Right.
Point, just like that, just out of the blue, it seemed like. And I wonder if it was unreasonable to think that he didn't know that the other coach that was involved and dismissed had been, working behind the scenes for a much longer time. And really, that should have been dealt with earlier and gotten rid of the first time, rather than having it look like a retroactive gotcha type thing.
Right. Yeah, so the question is about the timing of firing Coach Davis and why it wasn't done at the end of the 2010 season and then done later. Well, as I said, we were waiting to hear at the time that and this is nobody's fault but mine, that it didn't go down the right way. I'm not sure if I'd known everything, if I could have come up with a better one, but if you're the chancellor and something like this happens, then you're the one responsible for figuring out the right way to do something. And I mean, again, the thing that if I had known that all these things were going to turn into major violations, then it would have been easy to make changes at the end of the 2010 season. But we had never been through an NCAA investigation in Chapel Hill in 50 years, and certainly I had never been part of one. And so I was very optimistic that, we just had something with a few players, and maybe just the players would get punished, but the institution wasn't going to get punished. And that's, again, getting back to the question about what to advise Chancellor Folt. When you get into something like this, unfortunately, you have to assume the worst. And we were assuming the best. And that's consistent with the way we all have thought and felt about Carolina athletics for all these years, and certainly I did growing up and all that. But, and I like Mr. Cunningham has said a lot of smart things to the staff about that. This is a challenging, difficult, hard-nosed, competitive enterprise that we are in, and it has to be handled that way. And the evolution that we have gone through to get to this point, I think, has gotten us to where we can do that. And it's nobody's fault that we weren't doing that before. We had 50 great years of enjoying Carolina sports and enjoying each other, and everybody had the sincerest possible motives they could have. But this is a sometimes ugly, difficult, challenging business, and that's how it has to be treated.
Any comment? Next. Okay, we got one here on the front row, there and there. We'll go here, there, and there.
Athletics, and it was a great way. You win, you lose, you count the number of wins, you count the number of losings.
but I don't understand when you a little bit of a way of looking at academics through work. You get what you inspect, you get what you measure.
Right. Yeah, so how do you measure academic success? Well, there are a lot of magazines that try to do it for us. I'm not a huge, nobody who works in higher education is a huge fan of the U.S. News and the way they rank schools, but that to me are the easiest to measure and the most routine are the number of grants, the dollars and grants that the faculty bring in. That's a direct measure of faculty's research originality and scholarly productivity. And that, by that measure, if we're doing a good job, and as Woody just said, none of these problems have caused any decrease in the number of undergraduate applications we've got. In fact, we're up 43% the last 5 years, which is the largest 5-year gain in our history. Private giving is a good way to measure whether your donors think you're doing a good job. And there, again, we had the second best year we ever had last year, and it looks like we're on track to at least tie that this year. So those are some ways, but then you can also look at the productivity of degrees, the percentage of students that graduate in 4 years and 6 years. And when you look at all of those measures, Carolina is an exemplary public university by every single one of those. And we track all of that very, very carefully.
Well, how about professors is the next
Yeah, well, the
question.
professors are the ones that get the grants and teach the students that create all of those metrics that I just talked about. Is that what you're asking? I'm sorry if I'm not answering your question.
Can I ask?
Hold on just a second. Is that what you're asking?
In a sense of the word, but I too, as an athlete, looked for classes that I thought I could pass. I knew I had to maintain my average in order to stay in. I did not get tutors. I understand we had some tutoring problems. I expect tutoring to be granted to people that need it and made available. I had good professors, and I can name some of them, and I had some that I have forgotten. And those, it seemed to me to be evidence that measuring academics is much different from measuring sports and athletics. And that's the root of my question.
So hopefully I told you.
You came close.
Okay.
So can I add a little bit to what the Chancellor just added? So we're measured in various different ways. We are so the SACS accreditation requires us to for each major to have an assessment tool for all of our majors, so that to make sure that our students are, so as philosophy, for instance, we have an assessment tool to evaluate our majors. But each class we are also evaluated, and we also our grades are also public, so that we can see whether we're the grade inflation. So there's a lot of measuring. The difference is, of course, when a football game plays, you know the score afterwards. But for faculty, right, it's a little bit longer, and it's not as public. But believe me, we get evaluated in all kinds of ways, especially each class. Every one of our undergraduate classes is evaluated, and each department. So now there's a whole lot of ways for assessment. And SACS accreditation, as I said, requires us to have an assessment for each major.
Okay, right here. Would you explain the Loudermilk Athletic, Center that we're in? Yep, go ahead.
Sure. The Loudermilk Center for Academic Excellence is the building that we're in. There's 4 stories here. There's suites up at the top level, a club level, the upper club, the concourse club. Then down below, the level just below us, we have the Academic Support Center for Student Athletes, which is staffed by the College of Arts and Sciences. We have a new director, Dr. Michelle Brown, who has been on the job for about a week now. and I'm very excited. She's been at Florida Atlantic University for the last 18 years, has been the director of their academic support program. She, as I mentioned, works out of, actually she works out of the provost's office, and she will oversee the entire staff. So we do provide academic support for our student athletes, and we try to provide it for all of our student athletes. We have certainly some students that have a lot of need. They come in not as well prepared as some of the students here, but we also have a lot of students on our athletic teams that want to go to med school or law school that need to maintain a high GPA in addition to missing class and participating in sport. So we try to provide a broad range of tutors in a broad range of topics. And back to the question about measuring academics, at least from the athletic standpoint, you know, we begin measuring academics at the high school level. You know, are these students qualified to come? What are their ACT scores? What are the SAT scores? And what is their probability of success here? And we spend a lot of time with the admissions office before they get here. But then once they get here, we have an NCAA requirement that they need to be eligible semester to semester to continue their participation. So the NCAA has developed a metric called the APR, which is the academic progress rate. That has to do with, are you eligible and do you return semester to semester? And so we measure that every semester for every student, for every sport. And that's how we measure year to year. And then at the end of a 4 or 5 year period, do they graduate? So there's a graduation success rate, which is an NCAA number, and then there's a federal graduation rate, which is the federal number that every university in the country is required to report to the Department of Education. So we track that, not only for student athletes, but for every student on the campus. And I think the biggest challenge that we have as a large public research institution is graduation of minorities. So we especially track our Covenant scholars, we track the student athletes of color that participate in intercollegiate athletics, and the entire student body. So that's how we try to measure our continuing success. But this building plays a significant role in providing resources to those student athletes that we ask to miss an awful lot of class and to have a part-time job while they're also trying to compete at the highest level.
Bubba, is there a chance that some of these people could be exposed to what's down on the ground floor, the academic cubicles and things of that type?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And those former student athletes, you know, we could certainly, if you've ever attended a class, we could show you how to do it again. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'd be happy. If you want to go down to the second floor and take a look at it, I'd be happy to show you around. It's a wonderful facility.
It is really unbelievable. It is. Let's see, we had somebody in the back here. And then we'll come here and go over here. Why not just blow up the NCAA, he's asking.
Okay. I'm the only one who doesn't have that much to lose by answering this, so I'm going to answer that question. Well, I think that, you know, there's going to be a lot of discussion about that, and there is. Right now, the University of North Carolina and Washington University and everybody else in Divisions 1, 2, and 3, the NCAA is our organization, and they got a rule book, and we need to follow those rules and do the best we can within that. I think that there is a lot of, the NCAA has had a lot of difficulty changing the rules. I was part of the retreat that Mark Emmert had in Indianapolis in August of 2011. That retreat has a lousy record in terms of proposing things that have actually been adopted. We tried to do the $2,000 cost of attendance. That didn't work. We tried to change the academic standards. That just got rolled back. We tried to change the rules about how often you could call people and text people and who could do it, and most of that didn't get adopted. And my proposal for why this happened is that it shouldn't be the presidents and chancellors that are going to Indianapolis to invent this stuff. We're busy doing politics and raising money and taking care of the hospital and trying to tell the governing boards and the politicians about how higher education works and measuring all the things that Jan and I were just talking about that we're measuring. Bubba and Beth and our financial aid officers, those are the people who know enough about all of this to make those rules. And so this presidential control idea that was part of the Knight Commission's set of recommendations, in my opinion, that concept has gotten away from us. And I think there's no better evidence than the fact that we had this retreat in Indianapolis, and we didn't really come up with that many rules that we could implement. So I think the governance model is one thing that needs to be talked about, and I've been saying a little bit about that lately.
I also think that the concept of amateurism is going to be challenged. Most of you probably know that Ed O'Bannon is suing the NCAA for royalties from the video game, the basketball video game. I have a teenage son, so I know a lot about the basketball video game. They have our fight song, and they have the Ram, and they have Roy, and they have Coach K, and they have our building. They don't have Patty jumping up and down, but they pretty much have everything else from a Carolina basketball game. So I can understand why the people in that video game, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, there's various legal arguments that pertain to it, but the logical argument, I think, is pretty powerful, and a lot of people are paying attention to that. And if Ed O'Bannon wins his lawsuit, that's going to challenge amateurism in a way that I believe the people who are still in Division I athletics really need to be thinking about, because I think there are a lot of legal experts who think that he might win that case.
Do you have something?
Well, in the NCAA, I do think it's under attack right now, but for a very long period of time, it has served the needs of students fairly well. I believe in the amateurism model. I do believe in the NCAA. I think we are struggling with governance. We've gone from a one school, one vote to a representative structure, so I don't think as many of us feel connected on a daily basis to creating the rules and implementing the rules. They also provide great services to the institutions. There's a clearinghouse, which students are eligible to participate, what are the continuing eligibility standards to compete over a 4-year period. The basketball tournament, which has 350 teams available to play in it. There are over 400,000 students that compete in intercollegiate athletics. There are 1,100 members of the NCAA. We also have 11 conferences that play football at the highest level, 5 of which are considered BCS conferences. So if you're going to blow it up, what are you going to do in its place? That means you have to get 5 of the most powerful commissioners in the country to all agree with a certain set of standards and have someone tell them, I'm going to be the arbiter of all of your issues and set up a structure that's going to work. So as much as I get frustrated with it, I've never come up with a better alternative that would solve the issue that we're complaining about. So I think the way to solve it is what the Chancellor talked about, is try to really engage many of the people on the campus that are involved with it day to day. I think there could be another division within Division I, because right now with the 120 that play football, that participate in bowl games, we have a variety of budgets from $160 million at Texas to about $10 million, $12 million at some of the smallest Sun Belt or MAC schools. So you're not going to have competitive equity. But we tried to create competitive equity by limiting the number of coaches, having a minimal number of sports of 16 to be at Division I, limit the number of coaches that you have, and limit the number of scholarships that you have. So we tried to create competitive equity. If we throw out the rule book and start over, I think you're going to see just about 20 schools that can compete at the highest level. So I'm worried about just throwing it out and starting over. I'd rather see us modify what we currently have.
We're almost out of time. We have 2. Yeah, Keith?
Yeah, is it a fair and equitable distribution of the funds the NCAA takes in? Yeah, I think it's fair. And I think that, we tried a few years ago not to have a $1 million free throw. So when you get into the basketball tournament, you don't make a lot of money. Your school earns units in the tournament. All of the units from the members of your conference go to the conference, and you divide that money equally. You don't even get all of the television money. 50% of the money goes to fund the NCAA and fund the other championships that the NCAA supports. So when you hear about a $6 billion contract with CBS and the NCAA, that's not about the tournament alone. It's about kind of the financial underpinnings of everything that the NCAA does. So yes, I think that is a fair and equitable distribution.
We're just about out of time. We had 2 questions. Somebody here. Okay, you, and then the lady. There was a lady over here that had her hand up before. Let's get this one and that one, and then unfortunately we're out of time, folks. What's the academic minimum that an athlete has to maintain in order to be eligible to play at this level?
Well, first and foremost, you have to be eligible at your institution to participate. Ours is a 2.0, but when you're the NCAA minimum is a 1.8 first year, 1.9, then 2.0, but ours is a 2.0 from the start.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Oh, Woody can tell you that.
Incident that happened 50 years ago is there was some point shaving around the conference and everything, which forced Bill Friday, because some gamblers were involved, and they actually put a gun in the stomach of an NC State player at the railroad station in Raleigh one night, and the district attorney came over and told Mr. Friday, that had happened. Well, at times, as chairman of as chairman of that big committee that he was at one time, he was almost like a coach. But anyway, and he just canceled it. It was the greatest holiday basketball event in the country at that time, college basketball. And it was canceled because of the point shaving. And then we had some recruiting irregularities here at Chapel Hill. And that's what the NCAA, it was Coach McGuire's staff. And he left not too long after that, and then Coach Smith was moved into the position and everything. This came on the heels of it wasn't during, but it was after. It was in the late 50s, early 60s that happened, and it didn't involve the 57 national championship team. And I'm sure glad the NCAA never went to check the bills for that team at Spiro's down on Franklin Street. Listen,
A lot of beer.
I'll bet. Thanks very much for your attendance today, and I want to say just a word of thanks to our panel today. Dr. Beth Miller, thank you. Bubba, thank you for being here today. And Jan, I know both of you gave up some time. And Chancellor? Godspeed is exactly what I was thinking about. Great. Thanks very much.